Star Wars, one of the biggest and most popular multimedia fictional universes ever created. The Jedi, a mysterious organization of space wizards with lightsabers, someone anyone who grew up with Star Wars wanted to be. A 3D single-player game in which you take the fight to the Empire and duel opposing space wizards wielding the dreaded red lightsabers just like in the movies. It seems like such a no-brainer of a concept for a popular game. Despite this, Star Wars games have gone in seemingly every other possible direction through the years. It really is a bit of a mysterium why we don't have more such games, although I'm aware they exist. So, for me, no Star Wars game really ever reached the same heights as LEGO Star Wars The Complete Saga, which, whether you knew it or not, is a classic video series on this very channel.
Unless you need to control the Force, Obi-Wan. I'm your effing learner.
The epic Darth Maul fight in this game remained the greatest ever Star Wars boss battle, showcasing the fluent control in that game with moves like this.
That ain't Falco! That ain't Falco!
And now, all of a sudden, Respawn, the creators of the amazing Titanfall 2, one of my favorite first-person shooter games, comes out with a third-person perspective, FromSoft-inspired action-adventure Jedi game with an original story fighting the Empire. On paper, that sounds like a perfect game. And I'd go so far as to say that it is a perfect game because it's so good at making you overlook its flaws so that it appears to be perfect. You know, until it doesn't. Which is why I'm making this video, because when you first take notice of some of these cracks in the facade, the game comes dangerously close to shattering, and that goes double for the sequel. Let's take a closer look at Cal Kestis' adventures and try to understand how the Jedi games managed to be both great and terrible. You're watching Storm of Magic. This video is not going to go into details regarding the plot or the story of neither Fallen Order nor Survivor. However, considering I will be talking about everything else, you will see a bunch of clips, examples, and mentions of characters that I would 100% categorize as spoiling the games. So this is your spoiler warning. No direct spoilers or critique of the plot itself, but there will certainly be a lot of indirect ones because of the very nature of me talking about specific examples from the games. Let's get this started. What really sells these games first and foremost is the idea of being in a power fantasy as a Jedi. To be able to force wield, deflect laser bolts, do crazy Jedi athletics, fight epic lightsaber duels, it seems predestined to be a great action-adventure game. My personal experience with the gameplay predominantly suggests that this core gameplay is a success. Whenever I would see something that was kinda bad or didn't make sense, the feeling of, but I'm playing as a Jedi, this is so fucking cool, wins out over my concerns or frustrations, and I'm able to push a lot of problems out of the window, at least to a much higher degree than usual. But I suspect that if you're less of a Star Wars fanatic than me, this effect might not be present to remedy a bunch of this at all. Now, having said that the core gameplay is a success, I do think there's an argument to be made that points in a very different direction. That the gameplay is fundamentally flawed from the get-go. First of all, let's take a step back to acknowledge and make it clear that Respawn did, with 100% certainty, take inspiration from Software's Souls games when it comes to the gameplay. Most obvious are the meditation points that function exactly the same as bonfires in Dark Souls, meaning that they fully heal your character and allows you to level up at them, refills your healing items, function as the only way to save your progress, and of course, respawns every enemy in the level. Now, along with this, we have boss battles with complicated movesets and sometimes large amounts or especially difficult enemies that require some trial and error and skill to conquer. However, it is also a kind of game that bombards you with tips and tutorials. Most egregiously is perhaps the map tutorial in Fallen Order, which is torture on consecutive playthroughs, because you have to be spoon-fed the controls to the in-game map. You don't think I would be able to figure this out for myself? At least make it optional. I hope they make a tutorial for the next game, showing me how to look around and how to move, because it took me a few minutes to realize that I was supposed to use my mouse to look around. I would have never thought of that. This is kind of hard to verbalize, but there's also a very set way of how you're supposed to do things, not allowing much thought or creative thinking from the player. There's a lot of invisible walls, auto respawns, and very clearly defined moments where you're allowed to use your force powers and other abilities, and when you just can't. A lot of these might seem trivial, and I'm not even saying that they're necessarily negatives to the game, but I think these more streamlined aspects clash against the Souls-like ones in a way that makes me wonder whether Respawn really understands the reasons behind why Dark Souls structured its gameplay the way it did. It leads to a game that can be really unforgiving and then also treats you like a moron when it feels like it. Alright, but right now I'm coming across as overly negative, so let's come back to this, but first dial things back to the basic gameplay found in Fallen Order and discuss this phenomena that I from now on will refer to as the Dark Souls compromise, and why it actually works out surprisingly well. As I said, I largely think the game is super fun to play, even when the gameplay seems to be fighting against itself. Starting out in Fallen Order, you have next to no force powers like any special attacks, and there's only fundamentals to rely on. Block, parry, attack, dodge, jump. It feels good and it isn't overwhelming. Throughout the entire game, you gain abilities like wall running, force push, double jump, and upgrades like the double lightsaber. This evolves the gameplay constantly and keeps it from getting boring, even when the enemy encounters themselves don't necessarily get any more varied or complicated. One minor issue I have is that sometimes BD just won't give you a healing stim when you press the button. It can be really annoying to miss your healing window simply because the game didn't register it for whatever reason. It happens regularly, and often you can hear Cal shouting for a healing stim, so it makes you think it works, but then it just doesn't.
Stim here, BD. Help, please.
Also, why can you not backflip in Fallen Order, even after unlocking double jump? At least both of these issues were addressed in Survivor, and overall, Cal's feels almost as good to play as the average Jedi in LEGO Star Wars The Complete Saga. Evolving the gameplay as well as it was done in Fallen Order was always going to be very challenging in Survivor, because obviously you start with every ability that you gained in the first game. The new ones just have less impact, except for the new lightsaber stances that are amazing upgrades and fundamentally changes how one plays the game. I was personally completely addicted to the dual wield stance, especially for difficult duels, which is where it shines the most, but for certain bosses and situations I found the range and the stun shot of the blaster stance to be very useful. The last one is cool if you want to roleplay as Kylo Ren, but otherwise kinda useless. Lastly, the individual upgrades for the double wield are absolutely amazing and makes that stance so much better and fun to play in comparison to the first game. The games are without a doubt at their absolute best in the boss battle duels against other lightsaber wielders, which I imagine take a lot of inspiration from Sekiro, with a focus on breaking down the posture of your opponent while keeping your own intact with good timing and relentless counterattacking. The grappling hook in Survivor also screams Sekiro. Of course, it's nowhere near as hard, and I actually find the relatively low amount of real bosses to be a weakness of the series. The first game has 3 bosses that I would consider to be actually good. The Ninth Sister, the Second Sister, and Malicos. That is a little embarrassing, and Survivor does not really up the ante much here either, except towards the end of the game. The enemy variety outside of the Empire is also lackluster. I'm really tired of fighting against these fucking animals over and over. You go so fast from the exhilarating rush of destroying a great boss after an intense fight to biting the dust against these goddamn random creatures over and over. You want to hear the worst part? Let me ask you a simple question. What is the hardest boss in each of the Jedi games? Is it the Mad Malicos, former Jedi buffed up with the powers of Dathomir, wielding 2 red lightsabers? Is it perhaps the Second Sister, leader of the Inquisitors and the main antagonist of the first game? Now, I know, this is Star Wars. They probably put Darth Vader himself into the game and made him almost impossible to beat as a last secret boss. Well, actually, they made Darth Vader an absolute joke, and the real hardest boss is an oversized frog with the stupidest name possible. Literally the first boss encounter in Fallen Order. That's where the difficulty peaks. And it was such an amazing idea that they did the exact same thing again in Survivor. Because you know what's better than one overweight annoying frog? It's two overweight annoying frogs. Oh, I forgot, my bad. This time there's also a bunch of other enemies attacking you at the same time. You know you're playing a great game when it takes hours to beat a frog with a lightsaber. And of course, he spams one-shot attacks that will punish any minuscule mistake with hitboxes that rival the most notorious Dark Souls 2 boss fights. Look at this hitbox right here. Did anyone in the developer team actually try to fight this boss on the hardest difficulty? This boss took me 3 hours to beat, and it is so fucking bad that my recording software literally froze. So I can't even show you the moment where I beat it. I never want to see this dude ever again, and if Respawn puts another Ogdo clone in the third game, I will refuse to play it on that basis alone, even if the rest of the game is a masterpiece. You know, in the Star Wars community, there's a lot of dumb discussions about power scaling. You know, what is the strongest character? Is it the Emperor, Luke, Yoda, the Chosen One, Anakin, or after he turned into Darth Vader? Maybe Darth Revan from Knights of the Old Republic, Darth Vitiate, and then some annoying person is always going to bring up Starkiller because he pulled the Star Destroyer out of the sky in a game basically no one considers to be canon. But now, with the help of the Jedi games, we can actually bring a decisive conclusion to this discussion. Ogdo Bogdo and his brother on top, and then comes everybody else. I realize that these bosses are deliberately overpowered for when the player first encounters them. You're not really meant to beat Mr. Bogdo the first time you meet him. You don't even have any healing stims if you go to him directly. So I get it, it's my own fault that I was stubborn enough to beat these bosses on the hardest difficulty immediately on my reruns of the games.
What?
It doesn't negate the fact that these are boring bosses that would be immediately forgotten if they weren't vastly overleveled compared to the player. This might also be another side effect of the Dark Souls compromise where they just put a few bullshit bosses in there to make it artificially harder, but made them optional so that they still don't risk losing the casual players. It doesn't change the fact that it is reskinned a million times for you to fight as normal enemies throughout the entire game.
What the fuck?
And it doesn't negate the fact that even if power scaling in Star Wars is admittedly stupid and a pointless discussion, it also makes no sense and feels terrible that Cal struggles more against random wildlife than against the actual antagonists of the games. Which brings us over to the next subject, which is gameplay versus story.
Oh my god, bro.
Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck?
The most obvious example that I think everyone playing these games think about at least once is just how unnatural the level design can be. To take a random example, in Kashyyyk, you meet Saw Gerrera. He tells you to meet him further ahead. Cal follows the main path, but it looks like this. Why haven't anybody made some simple bridges or something? Are you going to tell me that everybody else also wall-runned over this hole in this way and decided to mess up its placement for Cal afterwards? Isn't this the main way to the refinery? If it, for whatever reason, is not, then why did Saw send Cal down this path instead of the easy one that they apparently took? Or look at how convenient it is that there's all this random stuff floating in just perfect distance for Cal to grapple hook off. This one is pretty damn ridiculous. Guess it's just lucky that there's all these perfect walls for Cal to run on. I mean, he'd probably fall to his death without them. It honestly feels like the entire world is designed to at all times accommodate perfectly for the current status of Cal Kestis' abilities. They don't feel like actual natural environments or locations anyone would work or live in. It's nitpicky, I know, but the games are filled to the brim with moments like this, where the level design conflicts with the narrative. But for the most part, it's pretty good from a purely gameplay perspective. It's usually clear where you're supposed to go, it forces you to use all the abilities available to you in order to make progress, and the distances are measured so that you always land in the correct place if you do it as intended. Of course, it's not flawless from this perspective either. There are times where it looks and feels very stupid. Regardless, this is a case where gameplay is massively favored at the cost of the story and the world.
Oh, my fault. There, I fix. Okay. Anyways, I want to talk about the underwater breather because I know the guy who designed the water breather, and I actually think they were like incorporate.
Let's go back to the aforementioned Dark Souls compromise, because this affects the story too. It is inherently strange from a story perspective to realize that whenever Cal meditates, every enemy respawns, which means that he never really kills most of the stormtroopers you come across, because when you go back to that area, they will still be standing there. It makes your fight against the Empire feel completely pointless. It's also really weird how they never alert each other over their comms about the guy running at them with a lightsaber. Everyone is always caught off guard. Of course, there are scripted sequences and story moments that do not occur twice, but most enemies are static and through reincarnation also happen to be everlasting. They ultimately end up feeling like window dressing for Cal to fight more than actual troopers with their own missions, goals, and strategies. This is one of the main reasons I'm quite skeptical about the Souls-like checkpoint system in the Jedi games, because in Dark Souls, the entire conflict of the story is that people are not dying. That is the curse that the dark sign brings to the undead. So they go mad and become hollow when they lose hope, and those are the guys you're fighting. Undead, like yourself. That's why both your own character and the enemies respawn. Of course, they don't stay dead when killed. It wouldn't make any sense. While in the Star Wars universe, I can't seem to remember anything about an undead curse, even in the extended universe. Fair enough, Respawn. You got me. Anyways, I appreciate how gameplay aspects like the map are tied into the story of the game. When, for example, BD displays the hologram of the map and stores your healing stims, these are not unlocked before we meet BD. Same goes for the underwater breather we get from the rebels in Kashyyyk, an Imperial scomplink retrieved from the Imperial base, and for the double-bladed lightsaber. Wait, no, for whatever reason they didn't even try with that one. Look at this cutscene here. Why didn't Cal just fix his lightsaber before this? He doesn't pick up any sort of new item from here either. He just all of a sudden decided that in this very cave that it would be kind of cool to have a double-bladed lightsaber. Why not just make up something about a Jedi having been here a long time ago, leaving behind a broken lightsaber that Cal can use? Why not do literally anything else than the bare minimum? Wait, scratch that. They don't even do the bare minimum. They don't do anything. He just fixes it out of the blue at a random time in an unimportant, narratively irrelevant, inconsequential, interchangeable, boring, arbitrary, completely uninteresting area without any acknowledgement of the fact from him or anyone else outside of this cutscene. Am I nitpicking at details that probably don't matter for anyone's experience playing this game? Probably, and I will continue doing it. Most games are separated into levels. The Jedi games are only really separated into planets that vary a lot in terms of size and design. Some are amazing and some are hot garbage. But mostly, I do think the level design is one of the better qualities. Plenty of areas loop back in on themselves with shortcuts to make retreats faster. Again, I wonder where they got that from. And there are some certain Metroidvania-style elements where you need certain abilities to get access to certain areas. An issue I have with this, though, is that it's basically never worth it to come back to these areas, because 90% of the time, you just get cosmetics that are cute, but they don't add anything to the game. It feels like I wasted my time whenever I backtrack somewhere just to get a new poncho that I'm never going to use.
All of these ponchos are so fucking disgustingly bad.
Still, I actually find it very satisfying to unlock all the different shortcuts because it makes me feel like I'm making progress as well as helping me link distinct sections of the map together in my head. I think Fallen Order did this really well and makes you familiar with its bigger planets in a natural way, partly because you have no fast travel and have to traverse areas multiple times without crossing over into tedious too often. I love the planets in that game.
Now, I'll preface this by saying that I know I'm definitely in the minority here, but Survivor tossing this out of the window and allowing you to instantly warp between meditation points is laughable. First of all, that it renders most of the clever shortcuts useless and worthless. Second, that it is such a confusing mess to look at. How the hell am I supposed to know where I want to go? And the third, that they decided to walk in the exact same footsteps of Dark Souls again, as the second game starts you out with the ability to warp between bonfires as a necessity, because the world was more linear and no longer interconnected, which was a huge disappointment for many, including myself. But most of Survivor's planets But most of Survivor's planets loop back on themselves constantly and has a lot of shortcuts just like Fallen Order, so it doesn't have the same reason to do this. Which is probably why they cheated by locking the warp ability constantly throughout the game because of story moments. Which to me is just acknowledging the fact that it makes no sense for Cal to teleport around, and that it should not have been included at all.
Just to very briefly mention this, something I think is unequivocally great about the Jedi games is that the soundtracks are awesome. There's a full orchestra of instruments adding their own flavor and variety to the tracks for both games. The style is very classic Star Wars. Try to tell me that the music playing when you first meet BD-1 doesn't sound like it's right out of New Hope.
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm looking for someone. No, not you.
Last but not least, here comes the section I've been anticipating the most. The instability of these games. There's a bunch of smaller stuff that you'll have in almost any game. Graphics glitching out, certain parts not fully loading, invisible walls in unnatural places, air hovering, invisible enemies, the list goes on, but I would say that there is an unusually large amount of them, and I might surprise you by stating that I mostly enjoy them. I think it makes the Jedi games more entertaining, and soon enough I'll be showing you some of the most egregious glitches that I've found, but first I must say that Jedi Survivor launched in an unacceptable state. It was virtually unplayable for me, and I bought it months after release. I sadly don't have footage from this as I never bothered to play the game properly and record it at the time, but the graphics would look unrendered and malformed, the game kept dropping frames constantly, crashing for no reason, and I don't really get how they messed this up so bad. So I don't mean that sort of instability when I'm talking about the entertainment value that I get from it. On my 2 playthroughs this time, I'm happy to report that the game ran much better and did not crash, except for specifically on the planet Jedha. For some reason, it would consistently crash after a few minutes of playing, over and over, regardless of what I did. Apparently, this is a common issue and is fixed by turning ray tracing off, which is really odd, but yeah, unless you turn ray tracing on specifically in Jedha, there's no more random game crashing in Survivor. So that's good at least. Now, before I give you the top 3 glitches I experienced, all of which I consider to be pretty insane, I want to start with an honorable mention that I found absolutely hilarious when it happened. A cutscene midway through the Ravis boss fight. What is kind of unfortunate is that I was testing out some different video quality settings on my recordings just as this happened, so it looks horrible. But in this case, I actually found it more entertaining like this. But I'll give you the cutscene as it is supposed to look like first. So shooting, shoots back, some random bullshit falls down, cuts it off, uses the force, to caught him off guard. That moment is, kind of funny. And this part works. I would say it's a good cutscene overall. Looks cool. We get into his new phase. It works. Now, but this one is something special. It's just so good. It looks so good.
I've been waiting for this.
And that's it, but oh my god. In spot number 3, we have something that occurred in the Darth Vader boss fight. Because this fight was way too easy, especially for being Darth Vader, so they had to do something a little special to, add to the difficulty. They had to give him like a special attack, right? That to make him a little bit more difficult. Something that throws you out of the boss arena so that you literally cannot attack him. That's a great idea for a mechanic in a boss fight. Because, yeah, I don't know, man. This sucks. This is absolutely terrible. I don't understand how this happened. I've gotten soft-knocked a few times in this game, but this really felt like the first one where I'm okay, well this is just straight up unacceptable. Like, what the fuck is this? How is this in the game, right? And I don't understand how it happened, but it's just really jarring. It kind of shows that there's just lacking a lot of polish in this game. And at the second place spot, we'll see that this is not only exclusive to this boss fight. Because Bode, the greatest character in all of fiction, has a transition between phases that triggers when he is at a certain amount of health. And it turns out that he doesn't handle it very well if you decide to interrupt it. So right here, the next phase triggers, but I'm holding in F, which means that with this stance, I'm making a parry ready, right? So when he does this, and I release the button, Cal doesn't attack, because that's an upgrade you can take. So I cancel out the animation with an attack, so I'm not where I'm supposed to be when this starts, right? I'm supposed to be in the air over Bode. But then it still triggers, but I go the wrong way. For some reason, he goes the entire opposite way. And then I'm up here again, and the fight just continues. But he's missing his lightsaber. For some reason, it's invisible. But, you know, I mean, it still functions normally. He still takes damage. So, you know, I mean, I guess we'll just continue the fight up here, right? And then, you know, this next part is just absolute cinema. Then Bode is stuck up there, and Cal's down there, and you know, that's it. The fight is over. BD goes over to the wall. You can scan it. It's just like, oh yeah, I mean, I guess we're done. It just canceled the fight. This one is just amazing on another level because the way Cal just starts flying out of nowhere, he just starts hovering, flying straight into Bode, goes through the ground almost. It's so good. It looks so terrible. I don't understand how this shit happens. Like, even if I break the specific trigger point where the transition is supposed to begin, like, why doesn't it just, it could just teleport me into the correct area. Like, but instead it just completely breaks. The entire fight breaks, and you're soft-locked again, and you just have to quit the game and go back in. It's so ridiculous. Speaking of ridiculous, we still have the number 1 spot to go. And perhaps most surprising, this glitch actually occurred in Fallen Order, so Survivor doesn't sweep the entire list. Alright, let me set the scene. I'm currently in Ilum, the planet where Cal has come to find a new Kyber crystal for his broken lightsaber. Which means that for this section of the game, you cannot use it at all, which is why Ilum almost entirely consists of puzzles and platforming. However, there are a few Imperial drones, and if you try to parry an incoming shot as you normally would, Cal still takes damage, but somehow he ignites his broken lightsaber. Anyways, apart from looking really stupid, it doesn't affect the gameplay. Until I tried opening this very chest, which Cal just refuses to do. Whatever, it's probably just a stupid poncho anyways, right? Well, for this upcoming clip, I'm just going to include my original reaction. I think it speaks for itself. Just keep in mind, this is 30 seconds after I tried opening the chest. What? 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 Okay. Sure. That makes sense.
Want to look inside?
I'm opening the box.
Let's take a look.
What the f was that? This is insane. When you first break these games, they don't just fucking break, they just completely incinerate. That's not the word.
So to round things off, I'll say that overall I enjoy both games a lot. The fundamental gameplay and the premise is so strong that it does succeed in carrying them through the many flaws that you'll find leaking through the cracks. I know I've come across as very negative in this video, but I think I'm better at digging up problems and complaining about anything and everything under the sun than I am at verbalizing my enjoyment of the good elements. I count Fallen Order as a great game recommended to anyone, especially for Star Wars fans, but I'm much more divided on Survivor. For a lot of reasons I've already covered, but mainly it's actually the story itself. I was originally going to talk about everything in this video, but as I started writing the script, I realized that I had so much to say about the story that it would make more sense as its own thing. So what will technically be a part 2 of this video will be an analysis of the story with the depth and the thoroughness that it deserves, because believe me, there is so much more to love and so much to complain about. If you take one good look at my channel, you'll see that this video has once again taken an ungodly amount of time to be made. So this time I'm setting myself a deadline. Part 2 about the story will be released before January is over. I don't like making promises, and I'm generally not the most efficient person in the world, but I'll sit down and work my ass off to make sure that this one drops at the 31st of January at the latest. I also want to say this to anyone who has watched up until this point. Every single one of you means so much. The half year spent working on this video, rewriting the script 100 times, dying to spawn of Ogdo 1,000 times, and adding in unfunny edits 1,000,000 times. It's all worth it if you, in this very moment, feel like you've enjoyed the past 30 minutes. In other words, if you didn't like the video, you are entirely responsible for wasting 6 months of my life. And you're a horrible person.